And next speaker, Dr. Siddheshwaraji. Dr. Siddheshwara Shukla. Let me introduce him. He is a senior journalist and researcher. He has about 14 years of professional experience in media, including the Pioneer, the New Delhi Gold Mine Advertising Limited, New Delhi, INCL uh, Group, Noida, Millennium Post, New Delhi, so many places he has done work. Presently, he is executive research and publication, Indian Institute of Insolvency Professionals, New Delhi. He spearheaded the launch of the Resolution Professional Peer Review Refereed Research Journal as its executive editor. He has published three co-edited books, over 12 research papers in national and international peer-reviewed refereed journals, including Social Scientist, the Asian Man, and African Journal of Social Work, etc., and presented papers in about 16 national and international seminars, conferences, and written thousands of news reports, articles in various national newspapers and international portals on a range of issues: development journalism, SDGs, energy, public health, biodiversity, culture, social problems, public policy, governance, law, crime, culture, and whatnot. Most recently, he presented research paper in Russia-India webinar on Shastrartha, intellectual discourse of the Vedic heritage and its relevance in contemporary world. His books include Indian Social Work, co-edited, published by Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group, London; Social Work in India, published by Concept Publishing Company, India; Kumbha, Crucible of the Cultures; Indic Social Thoughts. Besides, he has delivered invited lectures in the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, New Delhi, Department of Social Work, Delhi University, Center for Professional Development in Higher Education, Delhi University. He was invited by Center for Management of Health Services, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, for Healthcast podcast on the topic accessibility of PPP hospitals for EWS patients. So we can see that he is a high profile journalist working in various areas. His areas of research interest are contemporary socio-cultural issues, educational qualifications. His MA in Sociology from Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapith, Varanasi; MA in Broadcast Journalism from Makhanlal Chaturvedi, National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal. Let me also tell you that he is the student of our first day chief guest, Professor Kutalia. He just informed me. So I invite Siddheshwar Shuklaji just to deliver his lecture. Siddheshwarji.
Respected Chair, Professor Dr. Ravi Prakash Arya ji, and eminent personalities from diverse fields who are attending this seminar today. Namaste to all of you. First of all, I thank Maharshi Dayanand University for giving me the opportunity to present my research findings in this seminar. Sir, I will present my research paper in 4-5 points. Firstly, I will give a brief summary about Annaprasna Sanskāra. Then, secondly, I will come to its philosophical relevance, then scientific and in spiritual dimensions, and lastly, in conclusion. To start with, Annaprasna Sanskar is celebrated in various schools who follow the Vedic knowledge system. There are variations as per their regional requirements, as per the natural habitat, but it's actually they have tailor-made the Annaprasna Sanskar, which is suited as per their local and regional requirements and environment conditions. For centuries, Annaprasna Sanskar has been celebrated by people in India, more precisely throughout the South Asia. Presently, as we see the present political situation, we can say in different countries of the South Asia, and also in Iran. Dr. Rajbali Pandey has mentioned specifically that the Farsi Iranian culture, when India's boundary was touching Iran, it was also celebrated in Iran. So from that perspective, we can say this Sanskar, Annaprasna Sanskar, was celebrated in various cultures. People have been celebrating it as a religious activity, more precisely saying a dharmic activity. But the question of its scientific dimension, it arises when Indian culture, Indian civilization came in contact with the British civilization, or we can say European civilization during colonial period in the country. Then they started studying different sanskars from their perspective, their definition of science, and then started a debate that how these practices, which they call tradition or culture or custom in different terms, are suited in their pro forma of scientific celebrations or in their pro forma of science. But before going into that, I would like to give a brief on how this Sanskar is celebrated. Different scholars, different Vedic scholars has given their perspective. Most of them say the Sanskar should be celebrated in 6th month of child, when child gains the age of 6 months. But there are variations also. And it should be, if postponed, it should be 6, 8, 9, or 10 month of the child, but not after 1 year. Before 1 year, it should be celebrated. And on how it is celebrated, after proper sanitation, proper cleaning of the place where it is to be celebrated, brief puja, havan, the child is served some solid food. Generally, in local language, we call it kheer, which is prepared with rice, milk, some dry fruit also, and some other nutrient materials which are easily digestible. And sometimes rice is also mixed with barley. So cook a food that is known as kheer, particularly in North India. But in other parts of the country, in South India and in Kerala, in West Bengal and other parts, there are some regional variations as per their food habits. And they have different names also. In West Bengal, it is, or Bengal we can say, in Bengal it is named as Bhukhe Baat. In Kerala, Chorunu, Garhwal, Bhaktahuli, and different variations are also there. The first food, what we call first niwala to the child, is offered by generally by mother or father, but it may in some cultures, in some regions, mama, mother's brother, or bua, father's sister, and sometimes grandparents, they do also offer the first food to the child. And then blessings are given to the child by elders, and after a bhandara, we can say feast to the neighbors and other respectable persons, it concludes. Dr. Rajbali Pandey has also mentioned that some non-vegetarian food or fish in Bengal culture or flesh is also served. But I think it is not advisable, because today we know that meat is not an easily digestible food. So whatever is easily digestible as per the local culture is served to the child. People have been celebrating this festival for centuries, as I said, as per their customs and traditions, from father to next generation, but they never questioned it. This question of whether it is scientific and should be continued or not arises when Indian education system, more precisely the Vedic education system, came in interaction with the European education system during the colonial period. Then they started questioning this particular event, this particular celebration is not scientific, so this should be discontinued. Then from this side, scholars like P.V. Kane, Dr. Rajbali Pandey, they compiled those things, those philosophical perspectives, those visions behind these sanskars, not only the Annaprasna Sanskāra, but almost all the 16 sanskars which were celebrated to justify their practices in the eyes of European scholars, and who were trained in European education system. Dr. Rajbali Pandey has specifically given more account on relevance of these sanskars when he connects it with nutrition, personality development, and well-being of the child. But he too has written his monumental book in 1949, which is Hindu Sanskars, and the science was not so developed in those days. I mean to say, the research on child nutrition and related things was not so developed. So whatever he have concluded is not so justifying in the eyes of the European education system. But before we go into how this science came into being with the Annaprasna Sanskara, it was in 1970s when European education system was almost dominating in Indian academia and also in political sphere. Then with the blessings of Pandit Mahamana Madan Mohan Malaviya, a doctor from Banaras Hindu University, Dr. Annapurna Shukla, she went to do PhD in United Kingdom. And there she was posted in a hospital. And while her study, she noticed some very bizarre things there in those hospitals. Most of the children who were coming in the hospital were suffering from overnutrition, obesity, and other related diseases. And it was a very bizarre thing for her, because in 70s, there was no such case in India where children were suffering from obesity. And the so-called modernist pharma companies, what they did, they have made several baby products with the claim that their baby product is more nutritious than their mother's milk, and so the baby should be fed with those baby products and not the buttermilks. This was the one narrative. The second narrative was, by breastfeeding, the beauty of breasts deteriorates, and so the women should not feed their babies. And this was a huge problem in UK, including other European countries. Dr. Annapurna Mishra's research, which was published in British Medical Journal on 2nd December 1972 with the title Infantile Overnutrition in the First Year of Life, a field study in Dudley, it specifically mentions that how the infants actually were facing the problem of obesity and different, other related diseases which were due to overnutrition. Quote, a survey of feeding patterns and nutrient intake in relation to the growth of 300 normal infants up to 1 year of the age in Dudley highlights a problem of overnutrition in the group. They were found to be suffering from infantile obesity, and further 83% were overweight. 50% were suffering from infantile obesity, and further 83% were overweight, unquote. This highlights the problem of overnutrition, obesity, and other related diseases in child in the UK when India was not reporting any such case. And this was such a revolutionary research paper that it started a debate in the UK and European countries that whether these pharma companies who claim that their food is better should be banned or some regulations should be there to control them. And I would also like to quote one comment in the next edition of the journal by a scholar. Quote, standards of fat and carbohydrate intake are not available, but in comparison with the levels reported in breastfed babies, intake of fat and carbohydrate were high in the first 3 months and came closer to the desired level of the farmer and remained slightly high for the latter in the subsequent age quarters. Quote, I am quite certain that most parents, however misguided and badly advised they may seem to be in some cases at present, or only waiting for a lead and are anxious to do what is best for the nutrition in their infants. Respected sirs, it shows that on the name of modernity, what were being advised to the parents for their children? In India, we know the modernity stands for logic, the rationality, but how such irrational things were being instilled in the minds of parents and the children, their newborn babies, infants were suffering in the UK. And this research, what do we say? If you can pick any baby food product today, you will find mention one word at the bottom, statutory warning, and it says the mother's milk is the best for the child's. This line is the product of the intellectual campaign founded by the research of Dr. Annapurna Mishra. But her name is not mentioned in the UNESCO campaign. Today we know United Nations has launched a campaign that is known as Breastfeeding Week from 1 to 7th August since 1990. Through an international declaration, this is being observed. But if you go through all the written material of the United Nations, can I continue, sir?
Yes.
So you will not find her name. But what the foundation she had said provided logical and provided hypothesis for several other researchers. And today this has been proved. It has also been proved wrong by the researchers that the breastfeeding deteriorates the beauty of the breast. But the damage they have done, due to that, the United Nations campaign is unable to achieve the required breastfeeding throughout the country, throughout the world. The UN website mentions that out of the three, one baby, that is 30%, is not breastfed by the mother. And they are trying to achieve that target, which our ancestors had achieved without a campaign. The very logic, I think, that what went wrong with when Indian education system or Vedic education system came in interaction with the European education system. The perspective of the European scholars, or we can say the scholars who are trained in the European education system, is that they consider the Indian practices as traditions, customs, rituals, mores. But what do they understand about these terms is not valid for India. Indian traditions, customs, what they say, in Hindi we can say pratha, parampara, rit rivaj, or dharmik kriyaएं, they are not by superpowers. They should know. When they did not had even a school, we had a university named Takshashila University, which had disciplines which most of the universities of the contemporary education system do not have. Professor Chanakya was there, who gave the work Arthashastra to the world. Panini was professor there. Ayurveda, School of Ayurveda was there, School of Dhanurveda, School of Veda, all the schools were there in the university which are as per this system. But this system was actually a model for knowledge dissemination of the best product, of the best intellectual product of the university to disseminate into the society. So our customs are consciously created as part of knowledge dissemination. They are not arbitrary in nature like that in other parts of the world. Point one. Secondly, some in light mode when I was discussing with my professor, when I was working on Shastrarth project in Makhanla Chaturvedi University, Professor Sachidanand Mishra of Banaras Hindu University was the director, project director of that project. And one day in his chamber, I was discussing, I raised a question, sir, doctor of philosophy, when a scholar does PhD from Department of Philosophy, I can understand that he is in doctor in philosophy. But when a science student writes a PhD, I'm unable to understand. He say, why? Because I said, because neither they know philosophy nor they are doctor. So how can we say that they are doctor of philosophy? And I do not want to go into the deliberation, what we had. The conclusion I would like to present. Sir, what you write in your PhD at the part of conclusion or recommendation, in lengthy words, in several pages, the Vedic scholars used to write it in the form of shlokas. They were poetic also, so that the knowledge can be disseminated into society very precisely without distortion and practiced for centuries. And these are those shlokas on the basis of which these practices, I oppose to be called them as tradition. These practices are still in the society, even if, despite the fact that the knowledge, source of the knowledge has been destroyed. We know that Takshashila University is presently an archaeological site in Pakistan before 20th century. Okay, so before 20th century, Takshashila University was a mythology. But now we know it is a history with a lot of archaeological evidences. So the Western thinkers, all those who are trained in the European knowledge system, need to revise their understanding and must accept that the sanskars are not traditions, customs, muras in their sense, but they are actually the tools of knowledge dissemination from the university, which was much, much before than then started their university system. But of course, there is a spiritual thing in that, because since time immemorial, the Vedic knowledge system stands for spirituality. And what is the spiritual aspect? The spiritual aspect of sanskars is that the soul is eternal. It never dies. What dies is the body. So there are three entities: soul, mana, and body. Body dies, and all the impurities what we eat, some doctors say some toxic in the body and other things. When a person dies, the body is here, and all the toxicity of the body remains, and in last rites it goes into the ashes or under the ground, in which way you do it. But the soul travels. When the new baby borns, it's actually the birth of a soul in the form of a new body. And it is believed that whatever impurities, whatever the bad sanskars had been in the previous life, they come through, and therefore there is sanskars to cleanse the body, to ensure that the atma and mana, they are free from certain demerits. Mana is considered the previous sanskars, your previous activities also travel. And mana do not do any work. The work is done by body, but guided by mana. All of you may have heard one thing, that as mana, as the body, as you eat, as your mana. So from mana, they control the activities of the body. So this triangle of Atma, Mana, and Sharira, this is to ensure that the society gets the best citizens, country gets the best citizens who have a tendency, who have an approach that the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and do well for the society, for the world, for the universe. In conclusion, I emphasize that this is indeed a model for knowledge dissemination into the society. We had knowledge in our universities, our educational institutions of the Vedic knowledge system. I had an opportunity to work with Indian Council of Agriculture Research, in which I was supervising a project funded by World Bank. And the project was knowledge dissemination of various agriculture research centers of ICAR throughout the country. We had to extract, scientist writes 100 pages of research paper. From that, a journalist uses 3 to 350 words for publication in a newspaper, or hardly 1 minute, 2 minutes. So they were unable. They did research, but they were unable to, communicate to the society, to communicate to the farmers. In Haryana also, where this university is situated, there are dairy research center, genome research center, rice research center, equines for horses research center. I have worked with all of them. Equine center, they also work on donkeys and horses and other similar varieties. So they did research, but they say we are not able to convince the farmers. So we were hired to extract some juicy material from them, put in our news, pitch to the journalist for the newspaper, and then in different languages, and so that it goes to the farmers and they apply it in their fields. What do I want to say? That India, since time immemorial, since the Vedic period, we had very, very strong model of communication. In Vedas, we find mention Shastrarth. Throughout the Upanishads, we have it. The best practitioners of Shastrarth in Upanishadic is Rishi Yagyavalkya, Gargi. Then we have Adi Shankaracharya, Mandan Mishra. Then we had in the modern period, so-called modern period, we had Swami Dayananda Saraswati. But the most unfortunate thing is, in all the communication departments of India, of the Indian education system, what we call a modern education system, there is not even a single model of communication. All the models are imported from the European countries. In that sense, I say Indian universities are today the extension counter of their European counterparts. They produce knowledge, they import it, and they instill, impose on the minds of their students. I think this should stop. Swami Dayananda Saraswati, they did not study any model. He went on to communicate, very good speaker. And he propagated his idea through his own communication model. Not a Steven Weber model, not any other imported model. But today, India is completely dependent on Western models of communication. And I think this is the main reason we tend to ignore our models of communication, Vedic models of communication, indigenous models of communication. Some people may say that we have one Sadharanikaran model of communication which is based on Natya Shastra. But my rejoinder is that, dear fellow Indians, you did not produce it. It was developed by one Nepali scholar of Kathmandu University, Nirmal Mani Adhikari. We do not have even a single model. Even China has its communication model. African countries have their communication model. But India, despite having communication practice, despite having Nyaya Sutra, despite having so many practices, despite having Ashoka, who used communication as a public policy through his edicts on pillars throughout his country installed at various public places. Our academicians, those trained in European education system, failed to develop even a single education model. They failed to develop even a single communication model which they can say is their own. This is the problem, sir. We have a tendency to see our knowledge with suspicion. This should change, and we should have our communication model to improve all those things. Thank you very much for the time. Namaste.
Thank you, Siddheshwarji. He has deliberated upon a length of subjects, including Shastrartha, mode of communication in ancient India, Annaprasna, the Western style of feeding, and all these things. Very, very elaborately he dealt with his subject. बहुत ही अच्छा आपका व्याख्यान था. और अन्नप्राशन जो है, जैसा कि हम मानते हैं, देखिए जो शरीर है, जो मनुष्य का शरीर जो है ना, उसको अन्नमय कोश कहा है. और जो शरीर को जो ताकत मिलती है वो अन्न से मिलती है. जब बच्चा उत्पन्न होता है तो 5-6 महीने तक वो माता का दूध ही पीता है, और उसके बाद जो बाह्य अन्न है उस बच्चे को खिलाया जाता है. और जैसा वो जो अन्न है उसके शरीर को दृढ़ करता है. और जो शरीर है वो एक ढंग से उस आत्मा का घर है, क्योंकि जिस प्रकार से हम अपना मकान बनाते हैं, घर बनाते हैं, तो उसकी दृढ़ता वो लंबे समय तक चले, ये बहुत आवश्यक है। इसलिए शरीर को भी बहुत दीर्घकालीन उसकी स्थिति बनी रहे, ताकि आत्मा उसमें निवास करे और अपने भोगों को भोगे, कर्मों की करे। तो ऐसी अवस्था में इस अन्नप्राशन संस्कार की आवश्यकता। दूसरे, जो शरीर है वो मटेरियल जगत का है, वो भौतिक जगत का है, और जो आत्मा है वो तो शुद्ध स्पिरिट है, आध्यात्मिक तत्व है। तो शरीर का जो विकास है वो भौतिक ही तत्वों से होगा, और उसमें जो अन्न है जो बाह्य जगत में उत्पन्न होता है वो हमारे शरीर को मिलता है। तो इसलिए हमारे यहाँ अन्नप्राशन संस्कार का महत्व है कि बच्चा धीरे धीरे, एक प्लानिंग है वहां कि माता के गर्भ में आया तो बाह्य जगत से कैसे धीरे धीरे उसका इंटरेक्शन हो रहा है। जैसे उसका निष्क्रमण संस्कार हुआ, उसी प्रकार से उसका अन्नप्राशन संस्कार भी हो रहा है कि बाह्य जगत में, इस भौतिक जगत में जो पैदा हो रहा है वो उसके अपने शरीर में उसको कंज्यूम करेगा। तो ऐसी दृष्टि में अन्नप्राशन संस्कार का अत्यंत महत्व है। और हमारे जो विद्वान वक्ता है उन्होंने ये भी बताया कि किस प्रकार से पश्चिम में डाइट के पैटर्न है। देखिए, पश्चिम का कुछ भी जो है ना वो कॉमर्स बेस्ड है, और वो किसी गुरु के द्वारा, किसी एक्सपर्ट के द्वारा नहीं है, वो तो कंपनियों के द्वारा है। कंपनी को धन कमाना है तो वो आपको प्रोडक्ट देगा, और प्रोडक्ट से वो ऐसा प्रोडक्ट देगा कि आपको एक प्रोडक्ट खाने से दूसरी प्रॉब्लम उत्पन्न हो, फिर उसका दूसरा प्रोडक्ट बिके, उसके बाद तीसरी उत्पन्न हो, फिर तीसरा बिके। वहां एक ऐसी लंबी प्रक्रिया है, एक ऐसा प्रोसेस है जिससे आप बाहर नहीं निकल सकते। और ये तो ऋषियों का देश था, ऋषि धन नहीं कमाता था, गुरु भी धन नहीं कमाता था। जब विद्यार्थी गुरुकुल में जाता था तो उसको कोई फीस नहीं देनी पड़ती थी। जैसे कि हमारे पूर्व वक्ता ने बताया, बड़ा विनीत वेश में, विनीत वेश्यानी प्रवेश्यानी गुरुकुलानी, विनीत वेश में, बड़ी साधारण वेशभूषा में विद्यार्थी रहता था। वहां कोई इस प्रकार से भौतिक संसाधनों का खर्च नहीं था। तो जो ऋषि है, इसलिए हमारे यहाँ परंपरा है आर्ष ग्रंथों की। ऋषि दयानंद ने इस पे बड़ा जोर दिया है कि कोई भी ग्रंथ जो आप पढ़ेंगे ना, आर्ष ग्रंथ पढ़ेंगे, क्योंकि ऋषि को कोई लोभ नहीं है, कोई लालच नहीं है, उसको कोई पैसा नहीं कमाना। वह जानता है कि जो उसको कमाना है, जो उसका पुरुषार्थ है, वह तो अपलिफ्टमेंट ऑफ सोल है। तो जो ऋषि, इसलिए जो ऋषि बात कहता है वही मान्य है। आप यदि उसको मानते हैं तो आप बहुत दीर्घ काल तक स्वस्थ भाव से और अच्छे व्यक्ति की भांति जीवित रह सकते हैं। परंतु जब आप कमर्शियल लोगों की बात मानेंगे, ये जितनी भी कंपनियां हैं सब ये लूट मार का साधन है। इनको तो पैसा कमाना है, और ये चाहते हैं कि आप डेली बीमार रहें। आप देखिए 1891 में जब ब्रिटिशर्स ने भारत की सेंसस की, जनगणना की, उस जनगणना में पता लगा था 1881 में कि आउट ऑफ 5 ओनली 1 पर्सन इज डिजीज्ड। 5 में से 1 व्यक्ति बीमार है, 4 व्यक्ति स्वस्थ हैं। और आज की कंडीशन क्या है, आपके पास इतना बड़ा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, यू हैव अ बिग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऑफ हॉस्पिटल्स, मेडिसिन एंड एवरीथिंग, बट आउट ऑफ 5 all the 5 persons are diseased. Everybody is taking pill is short of another. आप पूर्ण रूप से आयुर्वेद की परिभाषा में कोई व्यक्ति इस समय स्वस्थ नहीं है। तो वो जो परंपरा है, पश्चिम की जो परंपरा, वो तो कॉमर्स की परंपरा है। वहां तो धन कमाना है, वहां तो धन को एकत्र करना है। तो उस परंपरा में आपको कोई शुद्ध चीज, कोई ठीक एडवाइस नहीं मिलता। यही कारण है कि हमारे यहाँ जो लोग हैं उन्होंने एक ऐसा ब्रेन वॉश किया है, पैराडाइम कॉन्स्पिरेसी, हमें ये समझाया गया है कि जो पश्चिम में बनता है वही ठीक है, क्योंकि प्रोडक्ट वहां बनता है और हम मंडी है, हम मार्केट है, हम खरीदेंगे, हम इंपोर्ट करेंगे। तो इस प्रकार का एक जिसको जाल कहते हैं, नेटवर्क उत्पन्न कर दिया गया है कि वहां पर जो कूड़ा कबाड़ उत्पन्न हो रहा है उसकी यहाँ खरीदी हो और उनको वहां उनके पैसे बने। तो इस स्थिति से छुटकारा पाने के लिए अत्यधिक ज्ञान की आवश्यकता है। और जैसा कि हमारे विद्वान वक्ता ने कहा कि जैसा खाए अन्न वैसा हो जाए मन। देखिए, क्योंकि मन और आत्मा का निवास तो इस शरीर में है। अगर इस शरीर को आप जैसा अन्न खिलाएंगे, वट एवर यू विल फीड दिस बॉडी इन कंफर्मिटी विद द सेम फूड, योर माइंड विल डेवलप एंड उसका बिहेवियर भी वैसा हो जाएगा। तो इसलिए हमारे यहाँ आयुर्वेद का जो सिस्टम है उसमें डाइटरी सिस्टम भी है, आयुर्वेद के अंदर मेडिसिनल सिस्टम भी है। किस प्रकार से बताया गया है कि नेचुरल वे में आप रहें। अगर आप अस्वस्थ भी होते हैं तो नेचुरल वे में ही आपका ट्रीटमेंट हो। ये जो सिस्टम है ये दुनिया में कहीं नहीं है। हमारे शरीर को हम देखते हैं, इसमें वात पित्त कफ 5 एलिमेंट हैं, 5 महाभूत हैं, पृथ्वी जल अग्नि वायु आकाश। आकाश तो स्पेस है, उसका तो कोई रोल नहीं है। और जो पृथ्वी है वो आधार है। तो 3 का मेन रोल रहता है, जल का, अग्नि का और वायु का। तो वही जो 3 भूत है उनका हमारे शरीर में भी रोल है। हमारे शरीर में जो जल का रोल है उसको हमने कफ कहा है, जो वायु का रोल है उसको हमने वात कहा है, और जो अग्नि का रोल है उसको हमने पित्त कहा है। तो पूरे ब्रह्मांड में भी इन 3 चीजों के कारण प्रॉब्लम उत्पन्न होती है। कहीं जल की अधिकता है, कहीं जल का न्यूनता है, फेमिनिन है, और या फिर इनंडेशन है, बहुत ज्यादा बाढ़ है, फ्लड्स है, वो सब जल से है। ऐसे ही वायु से कहीं भयंकर तूफान है, चक्रवात है, साइक्लोन्स है, और गर्मी से कहीं पर उष्णता है, कहीं पर ठंड है। इस प्रकार का वातावरण उसके अभाव में। तो ऐसे ही हमारे शरीर में इन तीनों का जो बैलेंसिंग है, बैलेंस ऑफ वात पित्त एंड कफ, ये हमारी बॉडी का धर्म है। और जब वो बैलेंस डिस्टर्ब होता है वात पित्त एंड कफ का, तो क्या होता है, व्याधियां उत्पन्न हो जाती है। तो उन व्याधियों का इलाज करने के लिए भी आयुर्वेद हमें क्या बताता है कि ऐसा मान लीजिए आपका पित्त एग्रीवेट हो गया है, विकृत हो गया है, या वात विकृत हो गया, एग्रेवेट हो गया है, या कफ एग्रेवेट हो गया है, तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे, वो आपको बताएगा कि ऐसा भोजन करें, वो अन्न खाएं जिससे वात शांत हो जाए, पित्त शांत हो जाए, कफ शांत हो जाए। तो नेचुरल वे ऑफ लिविंग हमें बताता है। उससे क्या है कि अगर व्यक्ति में बीमारियां भी आती हैं, अगर डिजीज भी आती हैं, तो ठीक हो जाती हैं। तो हमारी जो व्यवस्था है, जो वैदिकी व्यवस्था है, वो प्रकृति पे आधारित है। प्रकृति के साथ संतुलन बनाते हुए हमें आगे बढ़ना है। ये जो शब्द आया ना आजकल, इको फ्रेंडली, ये तो ऋषियों का बहुत पुराना शब्द है, और अब ये बड़ा प्रचलित है, इको फ्रेंडली। कुछ फ्रेंडली इको नहीं, इनको ये तो मूर्ख फ्रेंडली है। ये सब इडियोसिटी है, यहाँ कुछ ऐसा ज्ञान नहीं है। जैसा कि सिद्धेश्वर जी ने बताया कि हमारे ज्ञान को वहां घूमता है और फिर वहां से घूम के और एक नया उस पर लेबल लगता है और यहाँ आ जाता है, और वो भी शुद्ध रूप में नहीं आता है, अशुद्ध रूप में यहाँ पर उपस्थित हो जाता है। तो ये जो हमारे संस्कार हैं, व्यक्ति के जन्म से पहले और मृत्यु तक आपकी प्रक्रिया को बताता है, ह्यूमन बिल्डिंग की बात करता है, कैसे मनुष्य निर्माण की प्रक्रिया चले, इसको इन सब संस्कारों में बताया है। और आपने शास्त्रार्थ भी बहुत अच्छा बताया कि मोड ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन कभी पढ़ाया ही नहीं जाता शास्त्रार्थ को। ब्राह्मण ग्रंथों से स्टार्ट होता है, उपनिषदों में चलता है, आदि शंकर मध्यकाल में, प्राचीन काल में उसको अपनाते हैं, फिर महर्षि दयानंद आधुनिक काल में उसको पुनर्जीवित करते हैं। परंतु उसको कम्युनिकेशन, जितने डिपार्टमेंट है कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स में, उसको पढ़ाया ही नहीं जाता। उन लोगों को समझ में नहीं आता कि ये शास्त्रार्थ क्या है। वो नई नई विधाएं अपने आप में ढूंढने का प्रयास करते हैं। तो ये जो प्राचीन है, प्राचीन ट्रेडिशनल का अर्थ ये नहीं है कि मॉडर्न नहीं है। एक उसमें एक अन्य हमारा वो था, प्रोग्राम था, उसमें एक विद्वान प्रोफेसर थे डॉक्टर नरेंद्र वत्स, उन्होंने बहुत अच्छी बात कही थी कि एंशियंट डजंट मीन ancient. Ancient and traditional means most modern. It can be modern also. मॉडर्न का अर्थ ये नहीं है कि बिल्कुल नई चीज आई, एंशियंट चीज भी मॉडर्न हो सकती है, मॉडर्न कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ठीक हो सकती है, ट्रेडिशनल चीज भी बहुत ज्यादा मॉडर्न हो सकती है। तो ये हमें सब देखना है। हम ट्रेडिशनल के नाम से, एंशियंट के नाम से घबराए नहीं, हो सकता वो तो ज्यादा मॉडर्न है, वो आपके लिए ज्यादा रेलेवेंट हो सकता है। तो ये सब चीजें, इन पे हमें ध्यान देना पड़ेगा और अपनी संस्कृति को, अपने ज्ञान को हमें सहेज के रखना पड़ेगा। वी शैल हैव टू प्रिजर्व इट, ये बहुत आवश्यक है। तो आज के दोनों वक्ताओं का मैं बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूँ। सिद्धेश